Hi everyone, the book I'm reviewing today is called The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. It is quite a thick book and a long read. It took me a while to get through this book as well. It's an absolutely fascinating read. It looks, as the subject line here talks, mind, brain and body in the transformation of trauma. It can be a triggering read. He goes into detail and talks about case studies of trauma that he has come across, so it can be triggering. Overall, I found it a deeply insightful book, especially if you want to get to know yourself better and others, and the impact that trauma leaves on your brain and your body. I haven't read a book that encompasses all the aspects. It can get emotional, it can get a lot to get through, but if this type of topic fascinates you, I would definitely recommend it. While we all want to move beyond trauma, the part of our brain that is devoted to ensuring our survival, deep below our rational brain, is not very good at denial. And that's what we forget, because whenever we're thinking, we're always using our rational brain. But what happens from a trauma perspective is really deep below our rational brain, and that part is not very good at denial. And I like how the chapters in the book are structured. It goes through facing trauma, the impact of trauma on the mind, on the body, and I love the ending chapters on how he discusses different methods, not through medication, of what you can do. And in his own words, why did he write this book? I wrote this book to serve as both a guide and an invitation to dedicate ourselves to facing the reality of trauma, to explore how best to treat it, and to commit ourselves as a society to using every means we have to prevent it. And I think that's exactly encapsulates why I would recommend reading this book, because as a society, we need to be aware of what trauma is and the impact it has in our society, and what parts we can play to prevent and help those going through it. Lessons from Vietnam veterans. I was stunned. Tom's loyalty to the dead was keeping him from living his own life, just as his father's devotion to his friends had kept him from living. Both father and son's experiences on the battlefield had rendered the rest of their lives irrelevant. How had that happened, and what could we do about it? That morning, I realized I would probably spend the rest of my professional life trying to unravel the mysteries of trauma. How do horrific experiences cause people to become hopelessly stuck in the past? What happens in people's minds and brains that keeps them frozen and trapped in a place they desperately wish to escape? Of course, their behavior scared us, but I was also intrigued. From the same chapter, they insisted that I had to be part of their newfound unit and gave me a Marine captain's uniform for my birthday. In retrospect, that gesture revealed part of the problem. You were either in or out. You either belonged to the unit or you were nobody. After trauma, the world becomes sharply divided between those who know and those who don't. People who have not shared the traumatic experience cannot be trusted because they can't understand it. Sadly, this often includes spouses, children, and co-workers. Whether the trauma had occurred 10 years in the past or more than 40, my patients could not bridge the gap between their wartime experiences and their current lives. Somehow, the very event that caused them so much pain had also become their sole source of meaning. They felt fully alive only when they were revisiting their traumatic past. This is from a chapter called Looking into the Brain, the Neuroscience Revolution. For 100 years or more, every textbook of psychology and psychotherapy has advised that some method of talking about distressing feelings can resolve them. However, as we've seen, the experience of trauma itself gets in the way of being able to do that. No matter how much insight and understanding we develop, the rational brain is basically impotent to talk the emotional brain out of its own reality. I'm continually impressed by how difficult it is for people who have gone through the unspeakable to convey the essence of their experience. It is so much easier for them to talk about what has been done to them, to tell a story of victimization and revenge, than to notice, feel, and put into words the reality of their internal experience. Body-brain connections. Our culture teaches us to focus on personal uniqueness, but at a deeper level, we barely exist as individual organisms. Our brains are built to help us function as members of a tribe. We are part of that tribe, even when we are by ourselves, whether listening to music that other people created, watching a basketball game on television, our own muscles tensing as the players run and jump, or preparing a spreadsheet for a sales meeting, anticipating the boss's reactions. Most of our energy is devoted to connecting with others. Numerous studies of disaster responses around the globe have shown that social support is the most powerful protection against becoming overwhelmed by stress and trauma. Social support is not the same as merely being in the presence of others. The critical issue is reciprocity, being truly heard and seen by the people around us, feeling that we are held in someone else's mind and heart. For our physiology to calm down, heal, and grow, we need a visceral feeling of safety. No doctor can write a prescription for friendship and love. These are complex and hard-earned capacities. You don't need a history of trauma to feel self-conscious and even panicked at a party with strangers. But trauma can turn the whole world into a gathering of aliens. As my friend Ed Tronick taught me a long time ago, the brain is a cultural organ. Experience shapes the brain. This is from a chapter called Losing Your Body, Losing Yourself. Many of my patients respond to stress not by noticing and naming it, but by developing migraine headaches or asthma attacks. Suppressing our inner cries for help does not stop our stress hormones from mobilizing the body. And I think that's the key part. We think that if we can suppress it and hold it inside, whatever form it is, it will go away. But that doesn't stop the body from mobilizing the necessary hormones to react to that internally. So in essence, we're doing a lot more harm than good. This is from a chapter called Developmental Trauma, the Hidden Epidemic. Everything about us, our brains, our minds, and our bodies, is geared towards collaboration in social systems. This is our most powerful survival strategy, the key to our success as a species, and it is precisely this that breaks down in most forms of mental suffering. As we saw in part 2, the neural connections in brain and body are vitally important for understanding human suffering, but it is important not to ignore the foundations of our humanity, relationships and interactions that shape our minds and brains when we are young, and that give substance and meaning to our entire lives. Language, miracle and tyranny. What an absolutely fascinating chapter on language. Breaking the silence. Silence about trauma also leads to death, the death of the soul. Silence reinforces the God-forsaken isolation of trauma. Being able to say aloud to another human being, I was raped, or I was battered by my husband, or my parents called it discipline, but it was abuse, or I'm not making it since I got back from Iraq, is a sign that healing can begin. We may think we can control our grief, our terror, or our shame by remaining silent, but naming offers the possibility of a different kind of control. If you've been hurt, you need to acknowledge the name and name what happened to you. I know that from personal experience. As long as I had no place where I could let myself know what it was like when my father locked me in the cellar of our house for various 3-year-old offenses, I was chronically preoccupied with being exiled and abandoned. Only when I could talk about how that little boy felt, only when I could forgive him for having been as scared and submissive as he was, did I start to enjoy the pleasure of my own company. Feeling listened to and understood changes our physiology. Being able to articulate a complex feeling and having our feelings recognized lights up our limbic brain and creates an aha moment. In contrast, being met by silence and incomprehension kills the spirit. Or as John Bowlby so memorably put it, we cannot be spoken to the other, cannot be told to the self. Without language and context, your awareness may be limited to I'm scared. Yet determined to stay in control, you are likely to avoid anybody or anything that reminds you even vaguely of your trauma. You may also alternate between being inhibited and being uptight or reactive and explosive, all without knowing why. As long as you keep secrets and suppress information, you are fundamentally at war with yourself. Hiding your core feelings takes an enormous amount of energy. It saps your motivation to pursue worthwhile goals, and it leaves you feeling bored and shut down. Meanwhile, stress hormones keep flooding your body, leading to headaches, muscle aches, problems with your bowels, and irrational behaviors that may embarrass you and hurt the people around you. Only after you identify the source of these responses can you start using your feelings as signals of problems that require your urgent attention. Marlantes tells us that his road to recovery required learning to tell the truth, even if that truth was brutally painful. And I think why I really enjoyed this chapter on language and the extract that I've just read is, if you've been actually heard, listened to, doesn't matter what you're feeling, this is nothing to do with trauma, even just being heard when you've had a bad day or about what you're going through, it's one of the most beautiful gifts another human can give. From the same chapter, Penn Baker started off with a healthy respect for the importance of inhibition, of keeping things to yourself, which he viewed as the glue of civilization. But he also assumed that people pay a price for trying to suppress being aware of the elephant in the room. That's another thing. I'm sure all of you have experienced being aware of the elephant in the room and the price you pay for suppressing it. The mind is a mosaic. This is from a chapter called Putting the Pieces Together, Self-Leadership, another absolutely beautiful chapter. We all have parts. Right now, a part of me feels like taking a nap. Another part wants to keep writing. Still feeling injured by an offensive email message, a part of me wants to hit reply on a stinging put down, while a different part wants to shrug it off. Most people who know me have seen my intense, sincere, and irritable parts. Some have met the little snarling dog that lives inside me. My children reminisce about going on family vacations with my playful and adventurous part. When you walk into the office in the morning and see the storm clouds over your boss's head, you know precisely what is coming. That angry part has a characteristic tone of voice, vocabulary, and body posture, so different from yesterday when you shared pictures of your kids. Parts are not just feelings but distinct ways of being, with their own beliefs, agendas, and roles in the overall ecology of our lives. How well we get along with ourselves depends largely on our internal leadership skills. How well we listen to our different parts, make sure that they feel taken care of, and keep them from sabotaging one another. Parts often come across as absolutes when, in fact, they represent only one element in a complex constellation of thoughts, emotions, and sensations. The last thought I'd like to leave you with is from the chapter called Filling in the Holes, Creating Structures. William James said, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind." It is one thing to process memories of trauma, but it is an entirely different matter to confront the inner void, the holes in the soul that result from not having been wanted, not having been seen, and not having been allowed to speak the truth. If your parents' faces never lit up when they looked at you, it's hard to know what it feels like to be loved and cherished. If you come from an incomprehensible world filled with secrecy and fear, it's almost impossible to find the words to express what you have endured. If you grew up unwanted and ignored, it is a major challenge to develop a visceral sense of agency and self-worth. Let me know if you've read this book or any other book that you're recommending. And if you're brave enough to go into a self-exploration journey, I definitely recommend this book. Thank you.